Hi, Geeksters. How's it going? Welcome to Geeksterilia's podcast, your favorite podcast about sci fi, fantasy themed movies and series, as well as literature and pop culture in general. I am Cecilia, and today I'm very happy because I have two wonderful guests. One of them, my very own husband, who, for the English speaking audience, is a very new face, but he has been on my podcast, has a guest on my podcast about 3 times,
Yeah, a couple times.
and the Spanish version. So you may be wondering why I am speaking in English with my husband in this podcast, but I have a very good reason for that, and it's because tonight the wonderful Stephen
Yeah.
Stark is joining us. Welcome, Stephen. How's it going?
Doing very well, thank you. And you're speaking English because my Spanish is not great.
Well, I did make the decision to make some occasional English spoken episodes because there's a lot of wonderful people out there to talk to, not only in Spanish, but in all the languages in general. So this is the reason. So welcome, and I would like to welcome all of you, but especially I would like to say hi to Patty, my first and right now only Patreon. Hi, Patty. How's it going? Welcome.
We missed
I'm
her last
very
week.
yeah. She was supposed to come here and hang out, but but she got sick. So anyway, welcome here.
Hmm.
And okay, tonight we are talking about a very special movie. We have a wonderful topic to talk about, and it's none other than Villeneuve's version of Dune, the movie that screened for the first time in on theaters in last Friday, I believe. Last Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
And well, we all fell in love with this movie, especially, well, people who have read the book and have followed this story for a long time. And so, yes, we're going to talk about it tonight. And as you know, the format of this podcast is that first we speak about the topic without any spoilers, so that the people who hasn't seen it can join us in the conversation at least for a bit or for as long as they want to. Okay, so but first, I would like to ask Steven, or how's it going? How's it going with your channel? What's up? What's new?
It's going well. We're just doing our thing every Sunday afternoon, evening. We have a different topic. It's kind of like what you do on your channel. We
Mm-hmm.
don't always talk about the same things week to week, and you obviously talk about a lot of different stuff week to week. Like last week, we talked about. Oh God, don't make me try to remember. I think it was Star
Star
Wars
Wars related?
Vision.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was Star Wars Visions, but
Mm-hmm.
this Sunday we're going to be, and actually, yeah,
I'll
this
be
is
like,
quite the setup. Cecilia will be on my channel on Sunday, where we're
mm-hmm.
going to be doing a retro review of the classic movie Beetlejuice in honor of Halloween. We're going to be
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
just reviewing a classic, fun movie. So yeah, but
Yeah.
other than that, like. I also have a Slack community where a lot of participants, and we have a lot of fun over there exchanging memes and, you know, just building up a community of friends. We play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons over there. So, other than that, just living life. But all in all, things are going great.
Awesome. That sounds awesome. And I happen to have a huge nerd of Dune right here. For the Spanish followers of my podcast, you may be familiar that with the fact that Leo here is a huge music nerd, and usually when I invite him over to the podcast is to talk about music related movies and series, etc.
Hmm.
But this time, I can really say that I don't. know any more bigger nerd than him on Dune with Dune. So he was a perfect guest for this.
Thank you.
And okay, he's the Dune nerd of this conversation right now, because well, for me, I watched the David Lynch version a long time ago, but to be honest, it's a little hard to follow if you weren't familiar with the book, with the novel. And to be honest, I don't remember a lot of it. So, but I did like the visuals, and I did like the I like David Lynch style. So, well, other than that, I hadn't read the book. So, but the nerdverse is very quite based in a lot of aspects of Dune. So you get familiar with a lot of stuff, even though if you're not that familiar with the story, or you haven't followed it closely. But recently I started reading the novel, and before this movie came to theaters, and I just fell in love and I watched the movie, and I was very glad that at the time that I watched the movie, I didn't finish the novel yet, but I read up until the end of the movie. So it was awesome. It was incredible. And well, okay, now we're going to talk about the plot of the movie, about the plot of Dune, so that as I mentioned before, all the people that is not quite familiar with them, or hasn't seen the movie, or hasn't read the book, gets familiarized with the plot. So Dune follows the story of Paul Atreides, who is the son of the Duke Leto Atreides, that is the ruler of the planet Caladan, in this universe where in this universe where there are there's an empire, and there's
It's a
a
feudal
barons
society, but in space.
in space, pretty much
Hmm.
like Star Wars, and
Kind
uh,
of like Game of Thrones.
and like Game of Thrones. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Like I said, all of these stories that followed Dune, because Dune was released the novel was released in 1965,
Mhm.
and all of these follow-up stories, well, they based a lot of their stuff in Dune. So
Mhm.
you may feel, if you're not familiar with this, maybe you may be inclined to think that Dune is taking something from Star Wars, but it's the other way
Or
around.
from other series or
Uh-huh.
books, not just Star
Not just
Wars.
Star Wars. But yeah, and you follow the story when the Empire orders the Atreides family to change to move to another planet that was before ruled by this very cruel uh, ruler. Redundancy, but yeah, uh, called the Harkonnens, and they ruled this planet for 80 years straight, and they were known for their cruelty and their harsh ways. So they sent them here, and the problems begin, of course, because obviously the Harkonnens didn't like this move, and obviously the treaties also didn't take it very well, because they knew something was fishy out there. And the reason of this, why this planet Arrakis is so important to the story and so important to the plot, is because it's the only planet where you can harvest, or you can mine uh
Spice melange.
the spice, this substance, this magical substance, is wonderful, I don't know, kind of drug or something that is very powerful, and it's very expensive, and this it is what made the Harkonnens very rich and very powerful, up to the point that the emperor, uh, it's a little bit intimidated by this. So this is the reason why this planet, this desolated desert planet, is so important.
And I like to add that there's a little bit of background that is not mentioned in the movies
Mm-hmm.
in the movie, but it's important for setting the stage, and that is that in and I don't know, Steven, if you notice in the movie that there are no computers.
Mm-hmm.
It is a world without computers at all. So with that computer, you're traveling to space and time and to a whole galaxy. So the only way they can achieve that is through the use of this drug, the
Mm-hmm.
spice. So that's why it's so important. And the other thing is that they don't know how to synthesize the drug.
Mm-hmm.
They only know where to harvest it. And Arrakis, the planet where the Atreides have to go and live now, it's the only place in the whole universe where this drug exists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so important for the whole plot
Yeah.
of the movie and the whole universe of Dune.
And of course, this planet is very harsh and very well. It's hard to live there, and it's hard to harvest the spice. And one of the reasons is because of the sandworms, this
Mhm.
giant, huge-looking worms, like the
Like
one
that one.
there. That
Mhm.
yeah, like that look like a giant butthole. Sarah said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So they epic epic comment, by the way. Uh, and well, these sandworms feel they can sense vibrations. They can sense where when something is wrong, and that is when there's a rhythmic repetition of
Of anything.
yeah, of anything. They immediately realize that this is not normal, and so they go and attack.
Mhm.
So this is what makes it super hard to harvest the spice. And well, as I mentioned, well, the politic implications of the Atreides family to come to Arrakis, it's very important, and it's crucial for the whole thing. And it's this is where it gets to be a little bit similar to Game of Thrones. So yes,
Mhm.
this is a story about. This is a sci-fi story. It's considered a sci-fi novel, one of the best sci-fi novels ever. But it could also be considered fantasy, and it could also be considered a nice space opera,
Mhm.
one of the most important space operas of all time. And well, I guess I can say anything further before getting into the spoiler territory.
Well, it's hard not to spoil a book that's like 50 years old, so
I
and very
know, but
popular.
there's
So
yeah, but there are newbies out there. We were
I
Stephen
know.
and I were newbies to this story, even though we knew a lot of stuff beforehand, because it's impossible not to reference it when you are a nerd and you're so
Hmm.
familiar with sci-fi stories.
Yeah.
You inevitably come across a reference or two to Dune. So
Hmm.
yeah, but okay.
Yeah, as I was saying before we started, Yay, this is my real introduction to this story. I've never read the book. I
Hmm.
haven't seen the David Lynch adaptation. I know there was another adaptation done about 20 years ago. I didn't see that one either.
It's a
So this
series, yeah.
really is my first full experience with the story. And we'll just say I loved it, and then we'll get into the why later. But yes, I
Hmm.
really, really loved this movie.
Yeah, so do we. So did we. And
Yeah.
we were very afraid. We were a little. Well, I was a little afraid that they didn't get it right, because this story has been incredibly difficult to adapt. There have been a lot of failed
Attempts.
attempts to do it. Among them is the famous Hodorowski's version, which we
That
will get into
it
that
would have
later.
been great if it had happened, but
Yeah, it didn't.
it didn't.
And instead we had the Lynch version that it feels a little bit um I don't know how to describe it.
Well, if we want to talk about the Lynch version, is that, as you said, adapting the book to a
Yeah.
movie was very difficult because as we were talking yesterday, Herbert condenses a ton of information in just a few phrases.
Mm-hmm.
So to put that on the screen, it must be very difficult because you're dealing with 1,000 things in just two phrases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not for those who have not read the book, it's not a really big book, but it's you go slow when
Mm-hmm.
you're reading it because it packs a lot of information in very little words. And yeah, the several attempts have been first with Kodaroski in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been awesome because you got the guys that eventually work on the Fifth Element and Aliens and Blade Runner and all that amazing artwork and stages and costume design that was used on all those movies
Mm-hmm.
was originally to be on Kodaroski's
Mm-hmm.
uh, movie.
Yeah.
The soundtrack was going to be Pink Floyd. It was going to be the music for the Atreides. They had another German band called Magma that was going to be the music for the Harkonnens, for
Mm-hmm.
example. So that was right after Dark Side of the Moon. So it was going to be like "Wish You Were Here" was going to be the soundtrack, part of the soundtrack for this movie. And so yeah, that failed, but it failed because Jodorowsky as an artist is very stubborn too. So that
Yeah.
failed. Then the second attempt wasn't actually with David Lynch. It was with Ridley Scott
Mm-hmm.
from Alien.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Ridley Scott's brother died of cancer, and they had already spent 2 years in pre-production.
Mhm.
And he said, enough. And that's when they handed it over to David Lynch.
Yeah.
David Lynch was like you. David Lynch is not a sci-fi fan. He never read the book. And he demanded what the current director demanded too. He wanted to tell the story in at least two movies because it again is a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, the only thing that the studio was interested in was to have a cash grab of the popularity of Star Wars and other sci-fi movies. So at the end, they edited to a movie of 2 hours. What Lynch's original idea, if it wasn't going to be two movies, it was going to be a 4-hour movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it feels so that doesn't make much sense if you haven't read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for example, when I learned that they were going to be the movie and I saw in TV like the trailer, I was really excited. But I was worried about that Kodaroski failed, Scott gave up, Lynch didn't make the cut, and the 2000s, around 2000 series, the story's told well, but the production values are really cheap. It looks like Doctor Who, the reboot of Doctor Who, like the first season.
Okay.
It looks like they're using. It looks like it's a
Mhm.
high school play with the costumes and the sets. So that takes away a little bit because
Mhm.
a lot of what's really cool about Tunes for me, at least in the book, is
Mhm.
that it creates a lot of imagery in your mind while you're reading it because again Herbert describes a lot of information and about the setting where the people are.
Mhm.
So yeah, it blows your mind. So Lynch for some parts has really good sets, but Villeneuve had it's amazing. Looks beautiful. Everything
Mhm.
looks beautiful.
And um, a little trivia information here is that the Lynch version had some reshoots in very close here to where we live.
Oh yeah,
About an hour
an
drive,
hour drive
an hour
south.
drive in the Samalayuca Desert.
Hmm.
So it's exciting. I was really thrilled when I saw that they were going to do another version of Dune, because I said, okay,
They might shoot here.
they might shoot here, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't.
Well, and I think for me personally, when my first experience with Dune was the Lynch movie when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Channel 5? They had like their Saturday matinee things with movies, and
Mm-hmm.
they were really oddball movies. One of those was Dune.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw it there on Open TV here in Juarez. And one of the links was knowing that they filmed some here, but the other thing is that one of the heroes of the book and the movie are the Fremen.
Mhm.
The people are native to Arrakis, and living here in the desert made me like
Yeah, we
feel more
relate.
attached, relate more
Yeah.
to to those characters.
Hmm. Yeah, for people that don't live in a desertic environment, uh, well,
They take a lot of things for granted that we don't,
yes,
like having
yes,
plants or trees
exactly,
or water.
exactly. So, one of the things that you can say about people that have lived in the desert is that we are very we 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 tend to give a hand to each other. I mean,
Hmm.
to help each other a lot, and that's one of the wonderful things about living in Juarez. uh, Stephen, you may be familiar a little bit familiar with with this since you lived for a while in El Paso, the the city
Yeah, I
in
don't
the
want to talk
other
about it.
side. Okay, well, but that
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
yeah, but you know
Um,
the deserting
I
environment.
do. I mean, I'm a Texan. We have a sort of help each other out type mentality in general in Texas anyway.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But I think that's probably the case anywhere where there's a particularly harsh environment that people are trying to survive. You've got to take care of each other.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. But yeah, I was a little disappointed that they didn't shoot here. But okay, well, I agree with Patty. Patty says here that she would have been arrested for stalking Oscar Isaac and Jason Momoa. Yeah, that would probably had happened to a lot of
Oh yeah.
women here in Juarez. And
Some of the men too. Some of the
some
men
of the
too.
men too. Some of the men
Like
What's the
too.
name
like I'll
of
tell
the lead?
you, I'm
Sorry, go ahead.
straight. I'm
Hmm.
straight, but I would cuddle Jason Momoa all night. All
He
night.
would cuddle you too. Yeah, he would
Yep.
cuddle you
With
too.
he could be the big spoon even.
Yeah.
What's the name of the lead actor?
Oh, Timothy
Timothy
Chalamet.
Chalamet.
Timothy
I
Chalamet
think
or
he would
what?
have it like half and half.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of guys that think he's beautiful, so
Yeah, yeah. Straight guys that think
straight
he's
guys that
beautiful.
think that Timothy is beautiful. So
Not to mention other
the women.
preferences, other
Hmm.
women.
Hmm.
Yeah. So maybe it was a good thing that they didn't shoot in Juarez after all.
You mean now with the thing that Lenny Kravitz was in Chihuahua?
Oh yeah, I mean, yesterday was released a news that Lenny Kravitz was in the state of Chihuahua. I
Our
mean, the
state.
state where we live, and it became a trending topic with all of the jokes and memes that people started to make to do, and it was a huge thing. It was a huge thing because nothing ever happens in Chihuahua. Nothing ever happens.
Well, of
So
that
yeah,
sort, because a lot of
of
things
that
has
sort.
happened.
Oh yeah, yeah, of that sort.
Yeah.
Nothing good. Well, good things do happen, but
Yeah.
you don't hear much of those. So okay, I think we have reached the point where we can start talking about spoilers from this.
Okay.
Okay,
So
Steven, what would you like to say?
this movie is doing so many things. And by extension, the story that Frank Herbert wrote originally is doing
Mm-hmm.
so many things at once. It not only has got some very high-minded science fiction stuff where he is imagining a future that is so different from our own that it's
Mhm.
difficult to see how we got there. But it's not impossible to think that we
Mm.
could get there. But it's also a coming of age story for a young man. But
Mhm.
it's also an examination of classism and colonialism.
Mhm.
And it manages to make room for all of that stuff. Both, I assume the book, but specifically this movie has space for all of that stuff without feeling rushed through any of it, without feeling
Mm-hmm.
like it's dragging its feet through any of it. I thought this like chef's kiss to whoever edited this movie because the pace of this movie is perfect.
Oh yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. I mean,
Well, I think for me at points it could feel a bit slow, but the thing is, at this exact same beat is where the book gets a little slow. You know what I
Yes.
mean? I mean, for me, is that I read the book and other books because if for those that don't know are new to the Dune universe, what we saw in the movie is the first half of the first book.
And half of the second one. No, no,
No,
the second one. Yes.
it's just the first half of the first book. What we
Oh
saw
no,
in the
but the
movie.
first. Oh no, but the first book is divided in three books.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh huh.
That's pretty
So.
much halfway through the
Mhm.
book, and Frank Herbert wrote six books, one all the way out to 84, 85 after the Lynch movie, and then his son and some other guy wrote some other six books. So it's a 12-book saga, and I think in the movie and the book we're just seeing like the span about 6 to 8 weeks. The whole series covers 34,000 years of history,
Mhm.
of
Oh
human
wow.
history. So it's like,
Mhm.
so right now it's just like this thing that's flowering and it's about to explode in the story.
Mhm.
Um, but and the thing that I loved is that of all the adaptations is the one that is the most faithful to the book. They
Yes.
did omit for me one very important scene, but I'm pretty sure they're gonna deal with that on part two. That's now been approved
Mhm.
or announced, and yeah, there are things they omitted, but I can understand that if they included it, maybe in the book is really good to have it, but in a movie setting, it would have made the storytelling clunky.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm super happy with what they included. A few things got modified. Some dialogue was transferred from one character to another
Mhm.
compared to the book, uh, especially the litany against fear,
Mhm.
which for me is a very personal thing. I had a couple of times, and Cecilia got to experience one of those life-threatening situations. And since I had read the book and memorized it, is one thing that helped me go through those situations.
That's
Repeating the litany against fear, which in the movies is recited by Jessica,
Mhm.
and in the book is recited by Paul.
Mhm.
I'm I, I think it's fine that they gave Jessica that line. It's
Yeah, it makes
they
sense. It
normally
doesn't
want
bother
to,
me at all.
and that's one of those things that you hear just living in the nerd space. I
Oh
must
yeah,
not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Like I've heard that I don't know how many
a
times.
million
It's a
times.
great
Mhm.
line too.
It
Yeah,
is.
and I think it was powerful to transfer it to Jessica because in the book you get to know her, but you don't really get to know her. She's always a mystery because of the background that where she came from.
That's because you're in book one.
Yes, well, I know, but as far as as the length of the movie,
Oh
what the
yeah.
movie covers, you don't if you don't have that, you don't get to see you don't really get to know Jessica
Hmm.
because she's just a mysterious being that has superpowers, some kind of superpowers or something.
Yeah, a
So
Jedi.
yes, it's like a Jedi. But the thing is, the Jedi were more like based on the Ben Gesserit. But okay,
Yeah, I'm gonna say that.
uh, but the thing is that the fact that she said this line, that she said this litany as makes her relatable.
It gives her depth. I mean,
Hmm.
in the book, Paul says it because he wants to survive the Drumgy Bar,
Hmm.
and that's why it's famous in the book. The thing here is that in the movie, it makes her relatable because as a mother,
Hmm.
she's really concerned if his son is
Hmm.
gonna survive that test or not. So
Yes.
that's why they transferred. I think in the trailer, it is Paul who says the litany,
Hmm.
but in the movie is Jessica.
Yeah,
Well,
and
he might say it at some in part two, and the
Hmm.
way movies are made, I bet Paul did. Of course, Timothy Chalamet said it, but I bet they
Hmm.
filmed a scene where he said it.
mhm.
But then maybe they decided to give it to Jessica in a reshoot, even just
Yeah,
because. Let's face it, Rebecca Ferguson is killing it in this
Yeah.
movie. Like I think she
yeah.
has the best performance in the whole film.
Of
I
course,
agree. I agree.
absolutely.
Well, her and I cannot pronounce his name, that but the actor that is the Baron, he's awesome.
Oh, Stone
Oh,
Skarsgård.
Skarsgård. Uh-huh.
He kills it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the other problem. In the book, the character is a little bit over the top. With Lynch, is ridiculous over the top. Here is just the perfect mix of Tywin Lannister and Darth Vader.
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no. The Colonel from Apocalypse Now,
Oh,
Mm.
they pay
Marlon
homage to
Brando,
that.
even
Yeah,
down
the
to
scene
the
with the where he does this with the
yes.
hand. Yeah.
Like I
Well,
feel like that was maybe a direct nod to
it
Marlon
definitely
Brando.
was. It definitely was. And that's another cool thing about this movie for me. There are a lot of things that I see that they pay homage to Kodaroski's attempt, especially the design of the spaceships,
Mhm.
and and the inclusion of the Pink Floyd song in the trailer,
Yeah, that
because
was for Lynch.
that's like really a connect
Mhm.
to Kodaroski. And there are other things that are not to Lynch's movie.
Mhm.
For example, the shields, they look pretty much like 80s
Yes.
special effects, not like modern, like very Blade Runner style.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Which
they're
makes sense because Villeneuve was the one to make the
the
new
remake
version,
from Blade
the
Runner.
remake
Yeah.
of Blade Runner.
So
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of homage to like the Horosky attempt and to 80s sci-fi movies,
Mhm.
especially Lynch's Dune. So I think that he was very respectful for the past,
Mhm.
but in the end, doing totally his own thing beautifully.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And another thing that I loved was the visuals, was the portrayal of every scenario, the desert. It was a huge scale in
Hmm.
comparison with this very close-ups that feel very intimate, and where when you really get to know and feel the emotion of the actor.
Hmm.
That contrast was really appealing and really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's because Iraq is so much a character in itself as
Hmm.
Paul
Hmm.
Atreides or anyone else. I mean, the thing that the whole planet is a dune desert.
Hmm.
You need to have these huge landscapes to make you
Hmm.
feel the harshness and the
Yes.
difficulty of living in such environment.
Yes, so that the audience themselves can feel overwhelmed with this world.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very
It's necessary
interesting.
to tell
Hmm.
the story.
Hmm.
So, as someone who is a lifelong Star Wars fan,
Hmm.
I see a desert planet, and I'm automatically going to think Tatooine.
Yeah.
And looking at it, I was like, you know what? Give me Tatooine over Arrakis any day. Tatooine looks like an unpleasant place to live.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Arrakis is trying to kill you all the
Always.
time.
Always, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but and there are a lot of parallels, right? For example, in Tatooine you have the two suns, and in Arrakis you have the two moons.
Hmm.
And I mean, if you become a fan, Steven, and get to experience the, obviously you're gonna see part two for
Hmm.
what you said.
Mm.
But if you get to know the at least the first three books from Herbert, you're gonna see so much that Dune passed on to Star Wars. But
Hmm.
even in not just the original saga, but even the prequels, they have a ton of things that come from Dune too.
Hmm. Yeah, and for some people, I mean, I've heard some negative reviews of this movie because but they usually come from people that are not very familiar with sci-fi stories or where Dune came from. And I heard some comments on Twitter. Well, I read some comments on
Hmm.
Twitter uh, that they were especially talking about some review that mentioned that this movie doesn't have anything new to portray or to present. And well, if you come to think that this story was written in 1965, all of the most famous sci-fi stories that came after, well, came after.
Hmm.
So they actually took things from Dune, not the other way around.
Right.
Yes, correct.
And including, for example, the what I mentioned before with the Jedi and the Bene
The Bene
Gesserit.
Gesserit.
But one of the things that I liked about this movie, and another user from Twitter, it's at Afiag.
Mhm.
Um, he made a thread in Twitter talking about his impressions of this movie. He's a huge fan of the story,
Mhm.
and him one of the things that I found interesting that he mentioned is that has to do with this review is that Dune doesn't waste time trying to explain all of the sci-fi elements to you,
The
because
technology.
the technology and
Mhm.
the magic, and because we already know that stuff. We already know that stuff because other stories that came after took things from this universe. They presented it. You are already familiar with them. So they just serve back from what they took from this story. And that's wonderful. I found it wonderful.
Star Wars took that lesson, at least in the original trilogy.
Hmm.
Mhm.
There were, who we didn't know what a midichlorian was for
Yeah.
25
Funny.
years,
Hmm.
so you don't have to explain it all. And I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that they explain enough so we understand what the heck is going on, but we don't need to know
Mhm.
all the ins and out of the politics. We just need to know that the emperor is fears the Harkonnens' wealth and the Atreides sort of the
Charisma.
charisma,
Hmm.
and so he wants to set them against each other. That's what we
Yes.
need
Mhm.
to understand. Oh, and we also need to understand that spice is super important.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, Go. That's all you really need.
Yeah, and all the time that it would have taken to explain all that stuff, you now see it on the character development and on the stage development. I mean, the Arrakis itself, how they present it to you, and the fear and the emotion, and many of the things that are may feel a little incomplete in this one movie that are going to be completely developed in the second one, but not enough to not so enough to not as far as leaving you completely confused, but they give you just the right amount, like you said.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in the end, the novel and it is so famous because it's good storytelling. I mean, the story is compelling, and even though it's called sci-fi, is I think and that's something that Lucas applied for Star Wars is that before Dune, most of the sci-fi novels, like for example from Arthur C. Clarke, that the premise is we have this new technology and it solves this problem, but it creates these new ones we did not envision,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the push for having a story, right?
Yeah,
And that's a
the
basic
dilemma. Mm-hmm.
that's a dilemma in all good sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why a lot of people don't consider doing proper sci-fi because other things is just like you just take them in. I think people in 1965 people didn't take them in because they had not experienced all the 50 years of sci-fi movies that we've have. But since the geopolitical thing was so important, like in Game of Thrones, you take it as a given and you buy it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And well, let's read some comments here from
Hmm.
There's a
the
couple of
chat.
good ones.
Yeah.
I've been following the chat pretty
Cool.
closely.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
this is gonna feel weird, a little bit weird for the people that only listens to the podcast, but this is one of the reasons I like to do it in live is because we get some pretty great feedback
in,
from the viewers
in real
and
time.
in real
Hmm.
time. So yeah, I mean, um,
Hmm.
Aaron says here some things we may have benefit from slightly more explanation, like the bug that Paul
Oh.
caught and killed. Oh, that's very interesting in the
Hmm.
book, actually. Yeah.
The
You,
the hunter killer
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in the books is that and I mean, in the books, the Atreides know that they coming to Arrakis is a trap from the Emperor, but they cannot say no
Mm-hmm.
because he's the Emperor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing that it's on the books, not necessarily on the Dune book, but you read other stuff, is that the Atreides family and the Harkonnen family have been against each other like for
Mm-hmm.
500 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when they make the switch, Leto knows that it's a trap
Yes.
because they've been sworn enemies like for not 500, like 10,000 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, so one of the first things they have the meant that tougher
Mm-hmm.
to do is to make sure that there are no devices or traps or assassins in the castle because they're moving into the castle where the Harkonnen lived.
Yes.
So they know they're gonna be assassins. They're gonna try to kill us. In the book, they have like a ton, and they caught all of them like before the Atreides family arrives.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the only attempt, both in the book and the only one shown in the movie, that's almost successful. So it is a device. Again, there are no computers, so it's not like a drone that a computer is navigating it. They need to have a person actually at close range uh, directing it, flying it,
Mm-hmm.
like those,
Operating.
yeah,
Operating.
just like
Mm-hmm.
those toy airplanes, right, with a remote control.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing, that a lot of the things they use to kill people is very manual. That's why they have swords like Star Wars,
Yeah.
and they don't use guns, and they have, instead of, they have these needles, right? They're not use swords or knives. Usually use needles, like in the Gom Jabbar, the Reverend Mother with Paul, and in this case, this little device that has a poison needle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's the idea, that detects movement, and that's why Paul hides in the hologram, and that's how he saves the other person that is going to enter the room.
Yes.
Yeah, that happens in this movie, right? And
Yes. Yes. The Fremen
I'm not
lady.
I'm not sure if I confused with the
The
book
handmaid.
or the other movie,
Yeah.
but
Jessica's handmaid.
yeah, that's why he
Fremen.
got it.
Mhm.
Is that you would have died
Mhm.
because detect movement and goes there, but that
Yeah.
was it. It was a Harkonnen plot to kill Paul. In this movie, it's something that the Baron tried to do.
Mhm.
In the books, the Baron gets pissed because that happened, because it was not part of his plan.
Yes, because there was a traitor among them, and well, but before we go there, Betsy here as something
Mhm.
interesting. From what I saw, the bug was tech,
Yeah, it
or
was
was it
tech.
a living insect? It
It
was.
was
It
It's
tech.
was tech.
basically a tiny little drone.
Yeah.
And most of the people, like, if you don't know, that's my mom, by the way.
Yes.
That's the,
Hi.
that's
We
my
know, we
that's
know, we
my
know.
that's my IRL mother.
Hi, Bet.
She's a big nerd too.
Yeah. Hi, Betsy. And okay. Some stuff that was left out. I would have loved to see it because it would have add a lot more depth into some of the characters, especially Howard, the Mentat. We
Yeah,
don't we don't get to know much about him.
Yeah,
and he's
that's true. Like
Hmm.
there's obviously a whole lot of things they could cover, but the movie's already 2.5 hours.
Yes.
yeah, and the thing is, in the book, that particular the scene I think you're gonna talk about, it's it sets the stage for some attitudes and actions that other characters are gonna have in the second movie.
Mhm.
And what I think is that they're maybe gonna do like a flashback thing, or they're gonna totally omit it. I'm not sure what they're gonna do in the movie.
They could easily do a flashback because Paul is already having visions of all these different times and places,
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
like parallel realities, even because
Mhm.
he has a vision of that character Jamis telling him, follow me. I'm going to teach you the ways of the desert. But he
Oh
ends up
yeah,
killing him at the end of the movie. So
Mhm.
that's a future that never actually can happen.
yeah.
Oh,
That's
that's
very
actually
important.
that's actually
That's
a
very
very important,
important.
very nice point that you took, because it in the book, the all of the episodes. I mean, chapters. All of
Chapters.
the chapters start with a little excerpt from a fiction book that the princess Irulian wrote about the Muad'Dib. I mean about the Paul and all the story that we're seeing.
Who was not mentioned by name in the movie at all.
Yes, at all.
Just infer that she exists.
Yes, but well, it's a very you can see her in the Lynch version, but you don't see her here.
Hmm.
But she gives you a little bit of depth about the whole situation that you don't get explained in the text itself. And one of the things that was interesting about the topic that you mentioned is that uh I just forgot what we're going to say. I'm sorry.
Something about him
uh,
seeing futures that don't actually
oh
happen.
yeah. I mean, the thing is that that was one of the texts that you the Muad'Dib can see the future, but he can only see the future from the data that is available to him at that point.
And
It sort of explains it. So the Muad'Dib can be wrong predicting the future or seeing visions of the future because it's limited to the vision, to the current vision that he has.
but in the movie, we still don't get to the point where he's called Muad'Dib or
No,
mentioned at
no, no,
all.
no.
No,
Mhm,
no. I
mhm,
know what you're talking about just because I've been doing a little bit of research
Yeah,
to get ready
mhm.
for this. But yeah, he's not called Muad'Dib yet.
no,
No.
he's not
It's
there
still
yet.
just Paul Atreides.
Now
Mhm,
the thing there is that just we have to remember that in the movie I don't think they state his age, but in the book he's 15 years old.
mhm,
The whole bit that we got to see, he's just 15 years old.
Paul?
Yeah, he's super young.
mhm,
So, and that's one thing that I think was really good at cast Timothy because
mhm.
in all the other adaptations, he's a guy that looks like 40 years old. So,
Like a guy that looks 30. But the thing is, the weird thing is that all of the people who have portrayed Paul Atreides
uh-huh.
have been the same age, around 24, 25
Yeah,
years old. But well, Kyle MacLachlan,
it was his first movie ever.
yes, but he didn't look young, super young.
No,
No, they
no, he
made
At
did
him
all.
not.
super
He
older.
looked like a
Yeah,
grown man.
yeah, and
Yes.
Timothy is like, well, he might be 25, he might be 18.
Hmm.
The type
Yeah,
of
he's got a
cast,
baby face for
Yeah, he's
right?
got
sure.
a baby face.
So
So
that's
I was
good
very great. Actually, I was very grateful to Denis Villeneuve
for that,
for that cast
for that eye
because
candy.
no, not the eye candy. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
he's cute, but he's not my type. I mean,
Mhm.
he is no longer my type. If
Mm,
if I had seen Timothy Chalamet when I was 18 or
maybe.
something, maybe, but no. The thing is that it is. I feel that it is important to the story that
He's a
Paul
teen.
is a young person.
Yeah, and coming back to
Mhm,
Steven's point is that he's 15 years old. He just learned that he's part of some breeding genetics program
mhm,
with a John Gabar test, and he's starting to have his first visions because he's having his first contact with the spies.
mhm,
Okay, so I think that he has the dreams, and now that when they escape to the desert to survive and they go into the tent, that's when he has the most powerful vision. When he sees in the movie, he only sees one possible future, and he's arguing with his mom about the jihad and all that stuff. In the book, he sees two possible futures, and that's the thing that since he's first starting not to have just dreams but actual visions of what the future is going to be, he's not really good at it yet.
mhm,
So but that's good for him because instead of seeing the certain future that what's going to happen, he always sees a possible outcome. And in the book, he always sees several possible outcomes.
mhm,
In the movie, we just see one possible outcome, but they do drive the point that it's not the vision he has is not the outcome that actually happens.
mhm.
So, yeah,
May or maybe not.
maybe not. I
Mhm,
mean, and especially what you were saying, like Jamis, he says that he's gonna be his mentor, but we know he's not gonna be because he has to kill him
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the movie, and sees that he dies in the duel with Jamis in his vision, but
Mm-hmm.
he wins it. So at that point, he's learning that whatever visions he has, there's other options.
Mm-hmm.
So the future is not set in stone yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you mind if I go off about spice for a second? Because
Let's
I'm
go there.
reading, the more I've thought about it, the more I think what a brilliant tool it is in the story,
Mm-hmm.
how they've portrayed it. Because really all spice does is make you high. But
Mm-hmm.
in so doing, it can unlock some people's higher minded abilities the way so it's an analog to psychotropic drugs
Oh yeah, definitely.
and the psychedelics of the 60s, but it also is a direct analog to oil because
Mm-hmm.
of the way it unlocks the mind of the navigators to move to be able to understand how to move ships between stars. Without it, they got to be high to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's also an analogy to actual spices, especially when you think about the way that like Portuguese and Dutch uh, colonized the East Indies to get its spices and the way they treated the indigenous people there. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really kind of brilliant the way Herbert has taken that, though, all these different things and it's just the one substance that's a stand-in for all of them.
Yeah.
But it's I feel like that's something that I'm going to find a lot more of as I examine the film more, maybe read the book, see
Mm-hmm.
part two, all of that stuff. I think Herbert's one of those guys probably that has layers on layers on layers on layers, no matter what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like the story as a whole has a lot going on. Spice as a whole, Spice as a thing in the plot has a lot going on. Um, Even down to the way things are named.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
just
I mean, when you're mentioning the spice as a drug, Herbert used was an avid consumer of mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
hallucinogenic mushrooms. So that's the analogy. You're like spot on about the spice. He gets you high. He opens the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
but
he
it's a
also
spiritual thing even.
Yes, because it's
yeah.
yeah, like ayahuasca and that
Well,
stuff
At
and that
least
kind of
for the
stuff.
well,
Fremen it is.
Yes, it
well, for
is.
the feminists, but I think that's another point that we might get into later in the conversation. That
Mm-hmm.
uh, one of the things that what Paul is very angry on his very first ring vision about with the spies is this thing of jihad. So the whole series does have a message about charismatic leaders and about religion.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't see the book, and I think in the movie we're gonna see it in part two that yeah, it opens the consciousness, but it has a warning about religious belief and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but the oil thing, the drug thing, that's super spot on.
Oh, and one of the things that the book, as far as I am right now,
Hmm.
and the movie doesn't mention it at all, is that there is a relationship between the worms and the spice, but they don't. As far as I am right now in the book, they don't explain it yet.
We don't know it yet. Yeah.
Hmm. So there's, I don't know. I don't know. It makes me think that the worm also thrives on the spice or something, and it makes him.
I got a theory. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Uh huh.
Spice is worm poop.
Possibly, possibly, because
Hmm.
in one of the lines in the book it says Paul is thinking that, well, someone mentions that they should kill the worms at all,
Hmm.
but he kind of feels, and in his thought, because this is one of the things that about the book, that you know each character's perspective, much in like Game of Thrones,
Hmm.
uh, but one of the lines that he's thinking about is that maybe there is a relationship between the worms and the spice, and this is why, and this is the reason why if you kill the worms, you may affect the spice production. And
Hmm.
it only gets there. It doesn't explain it even further. I assume that we will get to know that later in the story, but yeah, there should be a relationship there because they mention it in the book,
Yep,
so it's got to be important.
it is. It
Mhm.
is, and you're not that far off, Steven.
Oh, really?
You're not that far off.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, but well, but it's not in the first books, but at some point they do explain the ecology of them because uh so far in the first book and the movie, the only living thing that you see in Iraq is
Mhm.
or are the Fremen that they're human, so they're not native there. Right? At some
Mhm.
point in the past, they migrated there to Arrakis, and it's the worms.
Mhm.
There's nothing else living there. So
Yeah.
that's
What do
a
the worms eat?
Interesting.
Sand.
I know, but can I spoil that? It's like 3 books into the series.
No.
I wouldn't. I mean,
And I won't mention it. But
Mhm.
it's a very weird cycle. But yeah.
Yeah. Betsy also mentions here, I also think spice is an analogy of anything we remove from nature, and any indigenous people really don't benefit from it. It's extraction.
Yes,
Hmm.
and for those who have not read the book,
Hmm.
and I don't know if you read the dedication. Is that how you say it in English?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
The book is dedicated to ecologists.
Hmm.
So just
Oh, sorry.
right to the point. Yes,
Hmm.
and one of the many things that inspired Herbert for his story is that in Oregon, in the state of Oregon, in the United States, there were some sand dunes forming, and they were threatening to start eating up highways. So it's something that went for several decades, but then it became in the 60s like a really big problem.
Hmm.
And they sent some ecologists to see how they fix it, and they realized that the dunes were man-made, just like in the 30s with the Dust Bowl and bad agricultural practices. A similar thing happened. So eventually they did crack it, and they planted a non-native type of grass.
Hmm.
And in the 60s, they were super happy because, and Herbert was super admired of ecologists because they planted that grass, and it started to become green.
Mm.
But yes, 2 weeks ago, I heard in NPR now that is a problem because that native grass is clean. That non-native grass is clean all the other native grass, and it's expanding through all the Midwest.
Hmm.
So, but at the time, he thought that some ecologists solved the problem, and that's why the oppression of the Fremen and the Harkonnen and the rest of the empire just harvesting the spice with no regard to the worms or to the people there. It's super important to the story.
Yeah. And also, well, this is very obvious, of course, but I have to mention it.
Hmm.
The Fremen are obviously an analogy of any type of native people in any
Hmm.
type of environment, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about the Fremen, and the thing that I find similar to native, both Native American and Native Mexican tribes, possibly in other native environments as well, but these are the ones I'm familiar with
Hmm.
because of our background. Is that these populations were very in tune to nature, and we see this with the Fremen because they have learned how to live in the desert. They have
And thrive in
learned
the
how
desert.
to, yes. For example, the Fremen walk in in the dunes, that it has to be a rhythmic, some sort of dance,
Yeah. So
some
the
so,
worm
so the
don't hear
worm
you.
doesn't, yes, so they learn how to move like the sand does. And for example, they learn how to carve some caves in the sand, and
The seeds, sure. That's how they
yes,
pronounce
and
it.
yeah, and At one point of them in the movie, we also see one Fremen riding a worm.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Yes,
super important in the
that is
movie and the
super.
books.
Yes, and I find it very interesting because this is exactly what happened in with the Native American community, Native American and Native Mexican communities when the white people came, that they didn't understand this communication, this
Connection.
connection with nature that the native people had, and they started just taking advantage of every single resource in the environment in this
Mm-hmm.
place.
On behalf of my ancestors, I apologize.
You don't have to.
No
You
worry,
didn't do
you
it.
don't have to. You didn't do it, and we also have white
Ancestry.
white
Sure, sure.
ancestry.
You got
Yeah, but
uh,
I think that because we're Mexican, we might feel that, but I really think, especially because of the language and the names they use in the book,
mhm. It
and
feels
it's
more
more
like
it's
it's
totally
more
more Arabic. I mean, a
yes,
lot of the
mhm,
words is straight out
Arabic.
Arabic.
Yes, I mean even
I
the
mean, Muad'Dib
portrayal.
is Arabic, is actual Arabic. Al Ghaib is modern Arabic.
Yeah.
Like the most of the names from the Fremen
Yes, but
is straight up.
you can you inevitably relate
Hmm.
it to what you know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and well,
Yeah, but I think that in Herbert's mind, it was more like I don't know if any of you two seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia or read the book.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I
Well, you
no.
should
mean,
watch it. It's a
Mhm.
you should
fantastic
watch it.
movie.
It's really good, and the idea, it's so far where we see Paul is going to, it's
Mhm.
very similar. I mean, it's in Lawrence of Arabia is this British soldier that somehow gets adopted by the Arabic tribes before Arabia was a country in like
Mhm.
1920s, and in the end he helps and unites as a leader the Arabic tribes so they can build this country.
Mhm.
And I think and the reason they're fighting is because they find oil, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's more the analogy, that the spice is the oil and the Fremen are the Arabic tribes.
Yeah.
And maybe in Mexico it could be linked
The
more like to the colony,
gold.
like you have
Mhm.
the Spanish, and instead of it being all it's silver and gold, right,
Mhm.
in the mines
Mhm.
way back
Well,
then.
if you think about it, but humans are humans and they will be humans everywhere.
Oh yeah.
So the history would repeat itself in any part of the planet that you can think about.
Oh yeah.
Hmm. So when when these foreign forces came and
Mhm.
they start taking advantage of,
Plundering without regard.
yes, they inevitably end up altering or messing up with the equilibrium or the the that this place has. It's I don't know how to explain that. Sometimes my English is not that great.
I think you put your point across
Your
very good.
English is way better than my Spanish. We couldn't do this in Spanish, I promise you. Hola, mi nombre es Esteban. ¿Dónde
let's
está el baño? You know, that's
let's
like,
try it in Mandarin next time.
oh man.
We're gonna be- oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean it's a very interesting story. I mean, if you take away all the magic and sci-fi elements, it's still a good story.
It's
It's still
still
a
a
great
good
Yeah.
story.
story, yeah.
Hmm.
I really, the thing is, okay, I expected to enjoy this movie, but I did
Mm-hmm.
not expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, I'm going to hat tip to Frank Herbert right now for because without him, none of this happens. But the real hero of this film is Denis Villeneuve. Like,
And the
Yeah.
studio, they allowed him to do what he wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, he's the thing is, he is at a point in his career where
Mm-hmm.
he's made enough great films that not only is the studio willing to say, Denis, just take the reins and go do the thing, but he can almost handpick actors because
Oh
what
yeah.
actor wouldn't want to work with Denis Villeneuve at this point? And then because it's Denis Villeneuve and because it's Frank Herbert's magnum opus,
Oh yeah, definitely.
every actor is bringing their A game, their top notch. Like, this is going to be a prestige movie when it comes out, and you don't
Mhm.
get to make very many sci-fi or fantasy prestige films.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but and I totally agree with you. But I think also that not just Villeneuve, but maybe the producers of the studio, two things. Maybe saw it as a challenge that no one has been able to adapt it in a satisfactory way. That
Mhm.
maybe someone said, no, we got to do it right, and we need to get the right director and the right casting and all that stuff. Um, and also, I think it was the right time for it. I mean, with Kodaroski, it failed miserably because first they didn't choose the right director, who was Kodaroski,
Mhm.
even though that, just like Dune, gave birth to a whole other host of sci-fi movies.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, Kodaroski's he wanted to make a 14-hour movie in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
Nobody at that time had the patience of that. I mean, now we have Netflix and we have
Ain't
the
nobody
patience
got
to.
time for
Yeah, I
Ain't
mean
nobody
now.
got time for that.
I mean now people have the patience to sit out and maybe see 5 hours, 6 hours of the same thing in Netflix or Amazon or wherever you
Mhm.
like to watch. But that's why it failed.
Mhm.
So that's wrong director, wrong time. With Lynch, similarly, I mean, the studio, the only thing they were interested, they didn't care.
Money.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
didn't care if they had a bad movie,
Mhm.
Oh,
and they were just thinking about the dollars. If you read some of the interviews, a lot of the actors already had contracts like for 3 or 4 movies because they thought even doesn't matter if it's good or bad, people are gonna go and see it, and we're gonna make a ton of money. So let's make it as cheaply as possible, so we get more return on investment. And that was said. So it was the wrong time.
Mhm.
But now I really think that uh, the director was an actual fan and didn't have a personal agenda. I
Mhm.
think the only Villeneuve wants to do is pay respect to the book, and he got the casting perfectly.
Mhm.
And I think the studio was behind him.
well, let's be honest. Legendary Pictures made this movie because they wanted to make money,
Of
and that
course.
Oh
is
yeah, yeah,
100% of the
Mhm.
reason that they
Mhm.
chose to make this film.
yeah.
But
But they
but
wanted
they're
to do it
also
right.
savvy enough to know that, oh, if we get good actors and a good director and put money into it, we can make several of these movies and continue to make money.
Right,
It's not a
Mhm.
cash grab. It's sort of like investing in the future.
right. And I think that's a mentality that did not exist in the 80s, for example.
Right.
Like they for that usually there was a saying here in Mexico. I don't know if it's in the US about any good movie that got a sequel. The sequels will always be worse than the original
Mhm.
because it's just like, oh, this was a hit. Let's make another one like super fast, and they don't pay attention to what make the first movie a success. I think,
Mhm.
for example, the franchise of Aliens is an example of that. That the first
Mhm.
one is incredible, the second is really good, and then you go downhill,
Downhill.
right? Or
Mhm.
even
It's
something as campy as a Superman.
there are exceptions to the rule. The
Yes, they
greatest
are.
movie of all time is The Empire Strikes Back, after all.
Mhm.
So
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that. Uh, but um, but yeah, I think right now is that they've the studios learned the lesson that it's better to make a really good movie and that pans out for more revenue into the future instead of just like, yeah, the people don't care, yet they will go to see any movie and let's do something crappy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that used to be the case before. And I
Mhm.
think they learned, especially now with the Marvel thing and all that stuff, like they don't have, I mean, they're not at the level of Dune, but they make sure that to have at least some basic quality in them that
I mean, they are good stories. There
they're
are
good
good
stories, but they
stories.
have
they have
a basic quality. They make sure they don't lose.
Mhm.
There's a baseline of how bad they can get
Okay.
before they
Mhm.
start losing money.
Mhm.
And I think that's the lesson they learn with the
oh,
studios.
you mentioned MCU, so can I
Hmm.
say um, Ho- Thanos,
Mm-hmm.
and um, MJ from Spider-Man,
Mm-hmm.
and there's like four MCU actors in this.
Oh yeah.
Who are the other ones? Come on, brain. Drax the Destroyer and Dr. Selvig from Thor are the two Harkonnen
Mhm.
big
Mm-hmm.
characters. So yeah, nice to see those MCU
Batista as
characters.
Bautista.
Bautista.
Dave
Yeah,
Bautista.
He's from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Hmm.
right.
And
And then the guy that played the Baron Harkonnen is
Mm-hmm.
the crazy doctor from the Thor movies, the crazy physicist.
Yeah.
mhm, yes. Sometimes when you have a sci-fi, a very important story like this, you, as a director, you may not want to cast a very famous face because then it becomes the movie of that actor.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they often go for less known faces. But in this case, I think it was a great move to go for all famous faces. I
Well,
mean,
and to be honest,
Well, it
not
makes it
just
more
famous
mainstream.
faces, but genuine actors. You know,
mhm,
Yeah.
when Dave Batista first showed up in Guardians of the Galaxy, I was like, some WWE guy, okay, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it, I'm like, oh, he's actually really good in that. And then I've seen him in a couple other things since, and I've just gotten to this point where like Dave Batista is an actor, y'all. Like he is
mhm,
genuinely uh, someone who cares about the art of being an
Yeah.
actor in a way that like I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody who works in the WWE, earn
Mm-hmm.
your living and what have you, but not all of them are that level of caring about the craft of acting.
mhm.
Yeah.
Um, Dave Batista is, Momoa is, Stellan Skarsgård is, Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, all of them.
Wasn't it refreshing to see Jason Momoa in a part he's not like "Rrrr,"
I
but
Yeah.
mean,
he's
he's
I mean he's still the rough guy, but his demeanor is very different from all his other movies.
It's
In
more closely related to his actual
persona,
personal. Yes.
his
yeah,
personality,
Yeah.
yes, it's like a. I mean, he's a warrior and all that stuff, but he's a like down to earth, easygoing guy.
Hmm.
The Duncan
hmm
how they portray in the movie and also in the books.
Hmm.
Yeah, because always Jason Momoa is like I'm this angry guy. Somehow, right?
I'm this tough guy that doesn't have any dialogue because
Grr,
my
you know?
muscles are more
Yeah,
important.
you know,
Yeah.
he's what
right.
he's saying is really important. He has a
Yes.
more gravitas. And yeah, what you're saying about this, maybe he doesn't. I don't think he has a lot of range, but I think he's super good at what he does. He's like
Momoa, you mean? Yeah.
no Momoa
No,
and also
but
Bautista.
Batista? But
Yeah, I
No, I
think
think Batista has more range than you think he does.
yeah.
hmm
I think
I have to
so.
see some more movies, but I mean, but what he does is he's super great,
hmm
and there are always going to be roles for him because I mean he's really good, and I mean in how they portray his character in the book, it's that guy
yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah, but think
And
about him as Drax. He's also got to deliver comedy
Mm-hmm.
and, and have emotion to when he's talking about, the death of his wife and daughter. I think Batista's the real deal. I think he's the real
Cool.
deal.
yeah, and I feel like we need to talk about Oscar Isaac because well, his character in this movie, I feel like it's perhaps the one and only
Oscar is
thing that
Gurney.
Oscar Isaac,
Yeah, but the
uh,
character is Gurney.
Leto,
Oh, Lito. Okay.
the Duke Leto,
Mm-hmm.
uh, also known as another one of the Latino space Latinos out there.
Mm-hmm.
And well, Oscar is a very he's a great actor. He's a great actor. He has so much depth. I mean, he lately he has been super praised about his with his role in Scenes from a Marriage, and he has a lot to give. But the portrayal in here in Dune, I feel like there were some except there were some parts in the book that would have given a lot more would have given him a lot of more emotional depth, but they took away those scenes. For example, I don't know if I should say this because it would be a potential spoiler for the second part of the movie, but there is a thing with with Howard the Mentat and Jessica the Bene Gesserit and the difficulties and the rivalry that they
Yeah.
have.
Mm.
But when they suspect there is a traitor in the group, um, points and fingers are pointed, and
Yeah, that doesn't happen in the
that
movie.
doesn't happen
In
in
the
the
movie,
movie.
they just get straight out, get attacked, and you find out there's a traitor.
Yes, but
In the movie, there's more intrigue, more Game of Thrones kind of stuff.
yes, and but the thing is that with the Duke with Leto, when he realizes who can be the traitor, he immediately starts to struggle with himself, and he immediately starts to doubt himself. And this is important because Paul sees this, and he realizes that his dad is a man after all, and it makes it connect with himself, and that's when he says, okay, I'm a human, and I can fail as well, just as I'm watching my father doubting himself. And even though he's a powerful man, that for some reason, for his charisma and his good leadership, the emperor himself is threatened by. I mean, and we didn't see that with him. Of course, Oscar does a wonderful job as the Duke, but I wish I would have seen some of these scenes when he is when in the book the Duke is losing his mind and fighting himself for not to reveal the way I mean, not to reveal that he already knows, and trying to protect his family, a lot of stuff. We
Well,
didn't see that.
well,
Hmm.
and for those who have not read the book, is that Duke Leto never finds out who the traitor is until it's too late.
Hmm.
But they suspect of someone close to him,
Hmm.
and he has to act in a way that he leads other people to believe he suspects the same person
Hmm.
as everyone else. And yeah, that gives depth to that character.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if why Villeneuve chose to take that out, but what lines and scenes the actor got given, I think he did great.
Yeah, I mean, he did wonderful, but I would have loved to see that a little bit more.
That more Game of Thrones part of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So,
So, have you seen the prequel movie to this?
To Dune.
Yeah, pretty sure they made a prequel to this movie back in the 90s.
I don't know. I have not seen it.
yeah, of course. I did
This
see
movie
it.
right here.
What?
The Spice World, of
Spice World.
course. Yeah.
I don't get it.
Oh, okay, all
For
right.
the Spice Girls, the
Oh,
Spice
Yeah, it's a
World.
Spice Girls
okay.
movie.
Need more beer.
Yeah. I knew
Anyway, sorry.
you
All
were
right,
going. I
cut,
knew
cut
you
the
were
joke in.
heading there. I knew you were heading there, but
Yeah.
I was just a little. I
Thank
wanted
you
to
for
be.
indulging me. I'm done with the jokes now.
I even posted that meme on
Oh, okay.
my. Yeah, I
Yeah,
even
it made
posted
the
it.
rounds
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, it was hilarious. But yeah, if you don't see the Spice World with the Spice Girls, you won't understand
Yeah.
Dune at
Mm-hmm.
all. Yeah,
Maybe.
and this the importance of the spice.
Yeah.
Oh, I see that Miss Man Jones is. He said he spits on the ground to honor you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Likewise.
Anyway, gross. All right. Um, there was something else I wanted to talk about. It'll come to me.
Okay, is it the Fremen? The
No, I think we touched
spies?
on. Oh, it's the politics, and just
Okay.
I know we
Okay.
touched on it a little bit earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
man, the way they're laying out the politics in this, where the Harkonnens are losing Arrakis, and they don't want to lose it, but the Atreides don't really want to get it because it's a poison apple. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it all comes back to the is it the Padishah Emperor?
Right.
Um, still a little shaky on some of the terminology here,
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
but
only mentioned in the movie, still not shown.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that to keep the movie flowing, they don't go into that a lot. But in the book, there's a scene where the emperor is talking to his daughter, one of his daughters, and in the palace where the emperor lives, they have like a hall with thousands of portraits
Mhm.
of all the dukes of the empire, and they go and see the one for Duke Leto,
Mhm.
and he's talking to his daughter of how much he admires the guy and wish that he was his son, but he's becoming so popular, and he's so charismatic that he's actually a threat for the
Hmm.
throne.
Mhm.
I mean, he's another thing they explain in the books is that um, the emperor, the power of the emperor is based on his military, which is the Saudukar,
The
who are
Sardaukar.
these ruthless soldiers that help the Harkonnen. And the only other force that might be a match for them at that point is Duke Leto's soldiers.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So Duke Leto is like this guy that lives in this really beautiful planet, but at the same time is maneuvering politically a lot, and he's the most popular guy of besides the emperor, and he's the guy with the best army besides the emperor. So even though he admires it a lot and wish that the duke was his son, he's go like, I have to get him killed in a way that it looks I didn't kill him.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So that's why he plots with the Harkonnen. The Emperor dislikes the Harkonnen a lot, but the only option he sees he
Plausible.
has,
Mhm.
the only option possible for him keeping the throne. So
Yes.
that's why he maneuvers that way,
Yeah.
which is
Miss
really
here.
similar to the first chapter of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. No way. Yes. Miss here has an interesting question that doesn't get and it doesn't get answered up until the point that I read the book, which is plainly the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is it says. Well, this is happening. What's occurring on Caladan? The Harkonnen probably attacked that world as well, but might there be a resistance forming or something?
They never mention it in
Then
6 books.
they never mention it. Interesting.
So the assumption is that
Okay.
nothing happens, and that's the other thing that
So, so
you can
Miss
have.
Man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Leo. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. The thing is, it's not like you're a duke of a planet, and
Mhm.
that's the only planet you have. It's, for example, the Harkonnen. They live in Gaidi Prime,
Mhm.
but they had Arrakis.
Mhm.
So it's like you have a planet which is your base, but you have other ones. So it's not like Caladan got abandoned. It's like Caladan is still part of the Atreides territory, but they just have to move to Arrakis to make to keep the business running.
Mhm.
So just to oversee the business of the spice, but Caladan is still Atreides territory.
Well, we do see in the movie a vision of Paul's where he is
With Chani
with Chani,
and
and
like
they are
reconquering Caladan.
yes. I saw that in one point.
Wha- Well, I might spoil the second part. Do you want me to explain?
No,
But
maybe not.
but
Uh-huh.
because what I was mentioning earlier about his vision about jihad. So basically, it was a holy war. A holy war is that you have this charismatic prophet or demigod or whatever you want to call it, and then he calls out for war.
Mhm.
right? The the difficult there is that you don't see their really like allies or friends. Since it's a holy war, o sea, the problem there is that if it's a holy war, is that they see Paul Atreides as a god,
Mhm.
and anyone that doesn't believe Paul Atreides is a god is gonna be get killed. That's
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Mhm.
So I'm just now, it's occurring to me
Mm-hmm.
that Dune has had maybe even farther reaching impact than I have realized up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are you familiar with the Warhammer 40,000 Space
No,
Marines?
no,
No.
I have not seen it.
Okay. Well, it's actually a tabletop game, but
Mm-hmm.
it takes place in the year 40,000.
Okay.
Um, and there is a god emperor of mankind who is a extremely powerful psychic being.
Okay.
Um, he actually wanted to suppress all religion, but over time he became revered as a god,
Mhm.
Okay.
despite the fact that he actually wanted to go pure secularism.
Mm-hmm.
But he was so powerful, and he's basically dead, barely kept alive. But he can't directly refute anybody, and now it's heresy to deny that he is a god.
Mhm.
Right.
Um, and
Yeah,
that's got Dune's fingerprints all over it,
that's right. I
hasn't
was doing, and uh, the third book, the third book is called God Emperor of Dune,
Okay.
which is not gonna be Paul.
it? Right.
No.
Okay, but there's some
I actually
implications
know
there.
who the God Emperor of Dune is. I
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just you pick up pieces of the story.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I mean, if you want to talk about the influence that the novel had, I mean, we've mentioned Star Wars a whole lot. Aliens, more on the artwork he inherited from Kodaroski, but in the plot, you have Terminator. It's if you read the saga completely, Terminator straight out of Dune, The Matrix straight out of Dune, The Expanse straight out of Dune.
Mhm.
I mean, it's
mm,
like it's like Dune had very beautiful children, which are a
Yeah.
lot of great series and books and movies. But a lot of them, if you want to, I mean, Herbert touched upon on his universe that he created. I mean, it's 34,000 years of history. They go back to Alexander the Great, all the way to I don't know 20,000 years after Paul Atreides is dead. So they
Mhm.
covered so much, and he covered so early in 1960, between the 65 and I think 76, that everything came before. You can call it derivative because he did it first.
Mhm.
Maybe not great, because actually on the whole saga, maybe the first three books are really good, and then it goes a little bit downhill. But from the three books, you get a whole lot of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to mention something else.
was it the music?
Oh, then yeah. Well,
Oh,
that was one of the things that we were going to mention.
it was
The
really
music,
good.
of course, it was amazing because it was well, it was. I don't want to say done by Hans Zimmer,
But it is.
but it is
Well,
okay.
directed by Hans Zimmer.
Directed by Hans Zimmer. Let's say
Let's
that
call
way.
it like that.
And it has some very interesting things worth mentioning. And one of those is the pipes. I mean
The bagpipe?
the bagpipe. Yeah.
Hmm.
At one point in the movie, the soundtrack was entirely instead of um, trumpets,
Hmm.
you get a whole bunch of bagpipes,
Hmm.
and it gives you a really particular vibe
Yeah, it's
and
unsettling.
yes, and a really particular mood to this that adds so much to the
Hmm.
scene and is worth mentioning. And well, of course, you get the feeling also in the music of the greatness, or the hugeness of this place,
Mhm.
and the dangers of it
Mm-hmm.
There's
that come
something
with it.
about that throat singing that they use as well.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
That and when
Mongolian.
did you see it in the theater?
Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah, so did I. And it's
it
like,
was loud.
I'm shaking in my chair when those deep notes are hitting, and I'm wow.
Mm-hmm.
I went and saw The Last Duel in the theater the day before, and Dune was playing in the theater next door, and I kept
Hmm.
hearing the rumbling from the next theater over.
Hmm.
Oh, the bass frequency is like.
Yeah, just with
Hmm.
shaking my chair in the theater next door.
Wow. Cool.
It was really fantastic. And Aaron M, who's in the chat, has said it a couple of times. You hear the bagpipe and you see Caladan, and you're like, it fits perfectly. You hear
Yes.
the bagpipe and you see Arrakis, and you're like, doesn't fit here.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Don't belong here. Um, and that's a really smart sort of like audio cue that they're used to tell that part of the story.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, talking about music, one thing that they omitted, the Swordmaster, the guy that played tennis in the books and the previous adaptations, he's portrayed like a really, really good musician.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they will
Hmm.
always put him like with a
Thorfinn?
guitar or something or a weird
Talking about
instrument.
Josh
No.
Brolin.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but here they like totally disregard that. That it's okay because it's not doesn't push the story forward at all. But it's something that is always mentioned and made a point in previous adaptations.
Yeah.
Like he's a super warrior, but he's really cool. He plays guitar. Like what?
Oh, actually, the guy that I mentioned, the Twitter thread that I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
about this is the guy that I was
Ah,
quoting.
Mm-hmm.
Afiag.
okay.
I have.
Hey,
Hi
is
there,
it Afaig?
Afiag.
Afiag? Can you
Well,
just
he,
can you put your Twitter handle in the chat so I can give you a follow real quick and I can
it's
find that
at
thread?
Afiag. Hmm.
That would be
He says,
awesome.
"Oh, sorry. I keep interrupting." He says, in an interview, Hans Zimmer said he created instruments especially for the soundtrack of this movie. This is why it sounds kind of weird. Which is, I believe, this is one of the resources that he reaches to the most. Well,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not like he creates physical instruments. It's more
hmm,
like uh,
modifies.
he resembles a lot of stuff,
Hmm.
which is back from the scenes in the 80s. He uses a lot of technique super well.
Hmm.
I mean, he's like, let's make an instrument that sounds like a screaming voice, but it's made of shattered glasses.
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing he does. So
Hmm.
some of the sounds he has are very unique,
Yes.
and that's because he is not like anyone has that sound. He created specific for that movie or for whatever he's working on, and that's how it's done. It's done digitally, but it's very effective.
For example, one of the things that I found very interesting that he has done
Mm-hmm.
was for the movie Inception,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the movies that I would like to talk about this in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Inception movie, one of the songs that was very important for the plot was Rien de Rien by Edith Piaf.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the very interesting things of details in the story in the music was that when they were in the dream zone, well, time run
Slower.
slower.
So the song.
So one of the most dramatic and iconic themes of the movie is actually a slow version of Rian de Rian.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the resources that he usually prefers or chooses. I don't know how to say it, but yeah. So this is what maybe he has musicians working for him, of course, but the vision that he has is great. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what he does and what he directs and how the way he conducts the music and the sounds that he chooses makes him a great person to choose for your soundtrack if you're
Yeah.
a movie maker, especially if it's something as epic as Dune.
Well, yeah.
And I also really appreciate that he didn't just resort to sort of classical orchestra, that type of thing. There's some of that in
Mhm.
there, but he really kind of went outside the box to create an alien feeling soundtrack.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I might be wrong, but when I saw the movie, I got the feeling that it, as I mentioned before, that Villeneuve kind of paid homage to the previous attempts. And for example, I really thought that the music they played for Caliban was very Pink Floydish in
Mhm.
the scene sounds and in the chord shows. And they were with the Harkonnen, it was very similar to the German band called Magma, which it
Mhm.
was the one that Kodaroski wanted to participate.
Mhm.
So I think that's the other thing that, I mean, in their time were like pioneer bands and synthesizers and like that. And I think he used a lot of sound like that to my perception. So I
Yeah.
think that that's one thing that I enjoyed about the soundtrack. That I thought, just like the chips, the sign of the spaceships, is was paying homage to the movie that never happened
Mhm.
somehow.
Yeah, and it makes sense because, well, in an interview, Afiag, and another participation by Afiag, is that he is a huge fan of the Doom book,
I
and he
mean,
is a fan of the Doom book.
and that's
He
why,
obviously was aware of the
yeah.
previous attempts of making this movie.
And again, that's what I
Hmm.
was mentioning earlier. That I think that in this attempt, a lot of the people were actually fans, so they
Hmm.
wanted to make it justice instead of
Yes.
just it's just a
Mm.
job.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. For example, an interview that I saw with Oscar Isaac. I feel weird of saying Oscar Isaac when I can say Oscar Isaac,
Hmm.
but anyway,
Yeah, you should say Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac. Okay,
It sounds way cooler.
it sounds like a telenovela name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk about the telenovela shot of the cast,
Oh
maybe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But we'll get to that later.
Okay.
But he mentioned in an interview that, well, he's friends with Denis Villeneuve from before. He collaborated with him in Deus Ex Machina, or whatever. um, so yeah, he has a director actor relationship with him already established. And when Denis Villeneuve was planning to make Dune, he immediately called Oscar and said and asked him, "Okay, are you a fan of Dune? Do you like Dune?" And Oscar was like, "Yeah, I do." And he was like, "Okay." And that was pretty much it. It was pretty much what he said. And then he found that Oscar found that he was starting pre-production of Dune. So he thought, okay, maybe that question was meant to invite me to the project or somehow. But the thing is that he immediately knew which character he was going to portray, even though Denis Villeneuve didn't call him in about 2 years.
Yeah,
Didn't call him back in about 2 years. But this is because you can. This is where you can see that these people who made this movie, this version of this movie, actually loved the story from before, and I think that this is what makes it special.
yeah. It's always helpful
Hmm.
when, especially the person who is creatively in control, really loves the source material. You see with Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings adaptation, and I think this falls into. I mean, it's only the first movie, so it's a little early to give it the same accolades that I would put on Lord of the Rings at this point. But
Hmm.
man, they've got a really great start, and you can tell that the person who is in control behind the camera really does love the source material and is willing to go the extra mile to make sure that it feels authentic.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean that's the whole reason why he fought for it to be two movies instead of just one, because he knew that one movie wouldn't have made justice to the book
Mm-mm.
at all. And like but previously, the book, actually in a chat that we were having in the car, uh, we mentioned that I mentioned that it's a completely different way to do it, but the way that it feels when something is described in Dune sort of feels like Tolkien's descriptions, but not in length, but in substance. And you know, um, it's more concrete and it's way less poetic, but it
It's super descriptive.
yes.
Super descriptive. We were talking about the John Gabar's scene in the book. I mean, Herbert details the room where they're at, where part of the world they are, how the is it day or night or is it cold, or how the Reverend Mother is feeling, what her relationship to the Spacing Guild is, what relationship she had with Jessica, and what they're expecting for Paul,
Hmm.
like in 3 lines.
Hmm.
It's like, and just because of the way the people talk and we express our feelings,
Hmm.
he's able to condense that like in 2 3 lines, a whole ton of information.
Yeah, and you get insight from the characters as well,
A
because you
lot.
get point of view lines. You don't get point of view entire chapters like in Game of Thrones. Well, like in A Song of Ice and Fire, to be more to be more
Hmm.
concise. But you do get in a scene, for example, you get to see the point of view of each character, why
Yeah.
they say what they say, and why they act like they act, and that's very insightful, and it's very it describes without describing,
Hmm.
and that's the magic of it. That's the magic of Herbert.
Hmm.
And in comparison, for example, to Tolkien, that is, you get a whole page about a tree, how a tree looks,
Hmm.
and it's very poetic and something. But in length, of course, it's not the same. But like I said, in the feel you get from a description, it's similar.
Yeah, it's a lot of information.
It's similar, and you really get to picture that environment, that place, and it's great.
Yeah.
And I think it's great.
Yeah, I might actually pick this book up and read it. I don't do a lot of reading. I'm dyslexic, so I read very slowly. Um, and
Me too.
I like great visuals. I like music. I love the format of, the audio visual format of film and television.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
but I'm also the first to acknowledge books can do things that TV and movies can't,
Right.
and vice versa. So I might actually pick up the book for this one.
You know, if you don't read the entire book, if you just read the Gom Jabbar scene, which is like right at the start of the book, that's enough.
Hmm.
I mean, it is actually the best part of the book, and the one that gives more information and gives you more about the plot, and also the one that has the best writing and the most part of writing of the
Is
whole book, which
the
is the litany for
of
fear.
pain
Or
and fear and pain, fear
yeah,
and
but if
pain.
you just read that scene, that's enough.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah. Well, I when I was younger, I used to read a lot,
hmm
and eventually I got to the point that I no longer can read that much. And but this book in particular, I have read it in a very slow pace.
hmm
This is why I was unable to finish it before the movie came out. Luckily, I had already finished the whole part
like
that
it was synchronized.
yes of the movie.
You got a little bit
A little
more, right?
behind, a
Like
little behind,
behind.
a little behind. Yes,
Okay.
but pretty much I read pretty much the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, obviously there is no shame in not reading the book of the movie
Oh
that
no,
you
no.
saw. Of course there's not, but if you do, it will give you a lot of more context, and you
Yeah,
know,
it's gonna give you a lot of context. And but now the beautiful thing of the new movie is that
you don't really need it.
you don't need the book to enjoy it and to
Hmm.
understand what's happening and have a great time watching the movie.
And that's the magic of movies.
Yeah, the thing is with Lynch,
Hmm.
if you didn't see the movie, you
You don't
didn't read the book,
understand
you
shit.
go like, this is really weird movie. What's going on? And that's
Hmm.
it. I mean, you might get it or like it visually,
Hmm.
but you will not understand fully the plot.
Which is what
Uh,
happens to me. That's what happened to me, and I don't remember
yeah, but
anything
this
of it.
one you don't need the book.
Hmm.
If
Yeah,
you
you don't.
you don't
And
need the
that's what I'm
book,
noticing.
and that's super good. I mean, you might miss some extra things that you get with the book,
That you may get later in the
and you
next
might get
movie.
them,
Uh-huh.
and you might not. But it's still, it's like think it's gonna be a very full experience.
Hmm.
And I mean, and we're also gonna get a lot of background story
Hmm.
because they're gonna make the spin-off series.
Oh yeah, the Banga
Yeah,
Uh,
series. Yeah.
yeah, Dune Sisterhood.
yeah,
Hmm.
which I don't know if they're gonna put it like in the timeline where Paul Atreides is, or like somewhere in the past. If it's gonna be in the past, it's gonna be super cool because between movies we're gonna get a lot of background,
It would
just
be
like in
cool. You
Star
know, it
Wars.
would be cool if they place the story right after they get rid of the computers that were threatening
That
them.
might be, but that's 10,000 years before Paul Atreides.
Yes.
But
But it would be interesting
yeah,
to see the origin story of the
at any
Banga
point
series.
in time before Paul Atreides is gonna work just fine.
Hmm.
But yeah, what you're saying is really good because it will bring a lot of context,
Yes,
a whole lot of context.
and well, now that we brought to the table the Banga series,
Uh
I
huh.
would like to discuss a little further about them
Uh huh.
and about the mentats, because it turns out that Paul, all of his life, was trained to be a mentat because he had the abilities,
Mm-hmm.
but he also received the training of the Bene Gesserit
Mm-hmm.
of because of his mother. So understanding these two ways of living
Well,
or
it's
executing power,
yeah.
uh, we will understand a lot about Paul.
Well, yes. I mean, in the Dune universe, there are several, let's say, powers or factions that wield power,
Hmm.
and one is definitely well the Emperor, right? Uh, so if we have the Emperor, we have the Spacing Guild, which is only mentioned,
Hmm.
was one thing that I wanted to see in this movie, but we didn't see.
Hmm.
But that's okay. So the Emperor, the Spacing Guild, the Bene Gesserit, and we have the Mentats. So the Bene Gesserit and the Mentats are ways that humankind found ways to develop humanity
Hmm.
through human abilities
Without
without technology. So
not without technology, without computers that
without
can threaten the
without
Yeah,
humans
certainly no AI of
species.
any
no
kind.
Uh-huh.
AI. Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's the deal. So, but the thing is that the timeline is so long that between the moment they abolish AI and we with Atreides, the Spacing Guild and the Bene Gesserit have been established institutions for 10,000 years. So that's like longer than what we have here in human history, right? So
Hmm.
it's like a really long time.
Hmm.
So they had enough time to develop these human abilities that to us appear superhuman.
Hmm.
I mean, part of the book says that the mentats are way much faster and better than any computer that ever existed
Hmm.
in doing computations and strategy and military stuff.
Hmm.
And the Bene Gesserit, instead of going through this logical computational way, they went through the control of their bodies. So
Hmm. And
all
spirit and
it,
psychology.
well, they use it for political purposes, but
Hmm.
most of the superpowers that the Bene Gesserit have is purely control of their bodies, almost to the molecular level.
Hmm.
To the point that it is mentioned in the movie that they say they chastise Jessica, like, you were told to have only
Daughters.
girls,
Mm-hmm.
and she chose to have a boy
Mm-hmm.
because they have that ability on their bodies. They
Mm-hmm.
can select the sperm
Mm-hmm.
consciously,
Yeah.
and the way, for example, they hand signal,
Mm-hmm.
and the boys, which is very Jade, I think,
Yeah.
they control
And
people with
also
the
they appear to
boys.
be able to like you can't lie to them.
No,
No.
no, they one of the jobs they have in Empire is to be truth sayers.
Yes.
So, and that's why the Bene Gesserit is like the most shady and underground of all the institutions, because all of them wield the power like very visibly and brutally, and not
Very straightforward.
very
Very
straightforward.
straightforward, but
And the Bene Gesserit come over like we an organization that provides services to
mm-hmm.
the emperor and to the houses, the
Mm-hmm.
royal houses. But a lot of the dukes and the emperor, or their wives or their daughters, are trained in the Bene Gesserit way,
Mm-hmm.
and the Bene Gesserit organization has their own interests, totally different from all the other guys.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
they're maneuvering politically a lot.
an important detail is that they are women.
Yeah, they're mostly women. In the books, you will, and probably in the movie, will only see women.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a reverse Catholic church. In the books, in the books, get to see that you will have men
Mm-hmm.
that are part of Bene Gesserit, but they cannot. They will always be super low ranking, just
Mm-hmm.
like a
And
nun in the Catholic Church.
okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's reversed.
Okay. Okay. But this is interesting because, well, this book was written in 1965,
Uh huh.
which was it was a time when there was another wave of feminism in this,
Oh yeah.
and I find interesting that of the fact that they are afraid of the power of the Bene Gesserit. I mean, they are afraid of powerful women. It may
Mm-hmm.
not have been written that way, but in this time you can read it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has happened throughout history for for a long time that women with a little power get to be classified as witches.
Oh yeah, and they do it throughout
And
the book. It doesn't matter if it's the Fremen or is the Emperor or the high houses. If they don't like the Bene Gesserit,
witch
they call them witches in a derogative way.
way, yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
I find it interesting as well. And well, on the other hand, we have the mentats that they are basically human computers, and you understand, like I said, they are very straightforward in their ways.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an interesting thing in the book, um, between a mentat and Jessica, the Bene Gesserit. There's conflict there, and you can see why this wasn't portrayed in the movie. Maybe it will be portrayed
Yeah.
later because the mentat that is in service of the Atreides house is very important to the plot. And
Which in the movie he doesn't that much.
we didn't see him do a lot. We just saw him like put his hands,
Eyes
his
they
eyes
like
in white, go white, and
in
give a number.
calculator. Uh huh.
And give a number. You don't understand
Why?
how he does it and why he does it, and the house and the whys and
Yeah,
the
that's not explained in the movie because his role is very diminishing. I don't know if
in
it.
this movie. But I feel that is going to be really important
I
in the
hope
second
so.
one. I hope so, because if you understand the mentat and you understand the Ben Gesserit, you will understand Paul. And
Mm.
there's another very crucial point in in the books, which is one of the revelations that Paul has when the Duke dies,
Mm-hmm.
and he finds out that he is unable to grieve his father, and he's wondering why he's not grieving his father, and he starts having all these visions and revelations and stuff, and he says something huge to Jessica about them and their origin. This is not mentioned at all in the movie. I'm not going to say it here because it's a major spoiler, and it will possibly have some repercussions in the second movie.
Yeah, so I'll make you a deal.
Mhm.
Invite me back in 2 years, and we'll talk about it then.
Of
Yeah.
course, of
I
course.
don't I don't I don't remember what part it is because I thought the dialogue was pretty verbatim from the book. I mean, Paul has his vision and he's angry at Jessica.
It's their origin. You don't remember that one?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's their origin. If you're a
yeah.
fan of the books, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I'm not gonna say it because it will potentially be a huge,
They don't
huge,
imply it
huge
at all in the
spoiler.
movie, right?
No, they don't. They don't mention. They don't say at all, and they don't mention some part of the. One of the characteristics of the Bene Gesserit is that they don't know where they came from.
Yeah,
They
they don't know who their parents are.
they don't know who
That's
their
not
parents
explained
are.
in the movie, but yeah,
Uh-huh.
there's gonna
So
be a
it's somewhere there. So you when you get the revelation and you saw this episode of my podcast, you will know what I'm talking about.
another thing that got inherited by Star Wars.
Yes, another
Another one
major plot
more,
line. Yeah.
Oh man,
and there are even more that are not gonna be in part one nor in part two.
Mhm.
But there are things still in the Dune universe that got
oh
pulled
Leo,
into the prequels.
I think Steven
Leo,
wants
There's
to
a
stop.
ton of
I
things.
think Steven
you
wants
made
you
it.
to
No,
stop.
I just wanted to no, no. By all means, go ahead. But you missed a
Okay, okay.
huge opportunity to say Duniverse.
The universe,
Mhm.
yeah,
You,
Duniverse. The
yeah, you missed
Duniverse.
it.
universe,
I
You
love
had a
it.
chance.
The Duniverse.
the universe,
The
the
Duniverse.
universe is a granddaddy of all of them.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so final thoughts about this movie and the whole thing in general.
I've seen it
Okay.
twice, and I loved it. And I can't wait for part two. Granted, it's going to be 2 years because they're saying like 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But man, give it to me. I'm ready. I'm ready for the book too. Like, and again, I don't do a lot of reading, but now that I have like a grasp of what's really going on in the story and who's who and what means what, like I know what Elisan Al Gaib is now. I know what
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Qua- is it Quasach Hadrak?
Quasar Hadrak, something like that.
Something like
Something
that. I
like that.
mean,
And
yeah.
there's
That's hard to
similar
pronounce.
terms. There's similar terms, but one is a really Bene Gesserit term, one is the Fremen term.
Mhm.
Right.
And like I really love that. So yeah, I think I might actually pick the book up on this one because I have a basic grasp on it now, and I'm not going to get lost with all the sci-fi words and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've said that there's like they did a really great adaptation, but there's that whole layer underneath that you just can't get to because the medium of
It-
film doesn't allow for it. So yeah.
yeah.
My
That's a
final
lot of
thoughts
time.
are everybody's great. I need more Zendaya in part two.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, her character is going to be very
I
Very
mean,
important.
important in the
she's set up. It's
the
set up to
movie.
be that way, but like,
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, but they couldn't put more Zendaya on part one because in the book it's just the same. The character doesn't
it's what the
appear.
story demands. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, some people complained about it because all the scenes from Zendaya look like, uh, a perfume commercial or something.
Well,
And I get it. I get why, but they just couldn't put it
right. You
any
can't
more
force
scenes
it.
her. You can force.
They could
But I'm also
if they
convinced
had
that
forced it, yeah, they would ruin it.
Mhm.
They
I'm
forced
also
it.
convinced that Zendaya is part Fey creature.
Mhm.
Like she's got to be from the realm of fairies and pixies and stuff.
Yes, yes, absolutely agree.
Not necessarily Chani,
Mm-hmm.
but Zendaya herself is part
Oh,
Yes.
fairy creature.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you. Zendaya is probably one of my huge current girl crushes of
She's
today's time.
awesome.
Yes,
She's
she's
awesome.
awesome. She's awesome, and I can't wait to see what she does for part two. And yeah, and Javier Bardem. Also, he's a wonderful actor, and
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to see him in part two.
And he's gonna be a lot on part two.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's gonna be huge. So yeah, and Jason Momoa. I didn't mention Jason Momoa at all, apart from the part that Patty was going to be arrested for for stalking him
Uh-huh.
if they happen to film here in Juarez. But yeah, I mean, we did mention that it was refreshing to see him in a role that was different from his previous roles, and I really enjoyed the fact that, well, Jason Momoa is from um, Pacific Islander descent
Mm-hmm.
as well, so that makes him a native that is going to talk to some natives, and he was going to be the link. And I found that detail very, very compelling, very exciting, very, you know, like, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I love the fact that I saw a mixed raced person be the link between here and there.
Okay.
As a mixed race person, I appreciate it. And okay, any other final thoughts?
Me is that, yeah, I really appreciate the cast. That was way more diverse than any previous adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
It felt weird that the future of humanity was gonna be just one race, one skin
Yeah.
color. So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Even that, talking about the desert, I would have liked to see more Mexicans or Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
desert people.
Oh, we
Uh,
got one Latino. Oscar Isaac is from Guatemala.
yeah, but more representing the Fremen.
Okay.
I mean, we have Bardem, but he's Spanish. He's not.
Mhm. Uh-huh.
But and so that's. But I really appreciate it because it feels more real.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, any changes that made to the storylines or dialogues that they changed, I think they did not detract from the book. So that's welcomed. A lot
Yeah.
of, when they do that, usually it's for the worse, and here it worked perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I really think they paid a lot of homage to the previous adaptations. And if any of you would like to see how movies are made or stuff like that, I would really, really recommend to any of you to watch the documentary on Kodaroski's Dune. It's a documentary about an hour and a half. Just by itself is super entertaining. All the stories, all that happened, all that went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but all that went right. So if you see that, you're gonna see that that attempt at Dune spawned a lot of pop culture, even though his attempt was to do something totally not pop culture and something super artistic and weird and
Mm-hmm.
surreal. But in the end, that spawned a lot of good art and good movies and
Yeah.
good stories.
Salvador Dali was going to be the emperor.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
on that attempt,
Yeah.
Oh wow.
yeah, and he was going to charge $100,000 the hour to participate on the movie. And yeah, we're gonna have that. You're gonna have Pink Floyd. You're gonna have Magma. You're gonna have a lot of famous actors that are no longer famous, but in the time
Mm-hmm.
super famous. And what else? I don't know. You.
I forgot to mention something very important that I want that I look forward to mention
Mm-hmm.
is that, and the character Kynes, who
Mhm.
is a ecologist in the
Oh
book,
yeah,
Yeah.
is a male.
it's a male,
Dr.
a white
It's
Lynch.
a
male.
male. Yes, and in the book is a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and I liked it. It didn't feel forced at all. It didn't feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
I really found it very compelling that it was a woman, and her character is very important. Her character is very crucial because she's she is the represent well she or he in the book is the representation of what the Fremen are thinking. You get to understand why they see Paul the way they see him, as a messiah or
Mm-hmm.
something, with doubts and everything. And this is a faith questioning person in the book. So you get to see her perspective as a person who knows the legend
Mm-hmm.
of the Muad'Dib, and and how she doubts that this kid is the man they are expecting him to be.
Mm-hmm.
But you get to understand why they think the way they think. And this is very cool because she or he in the book is the way that you get to understand a little bit more about the Fremen.
It's the connection
Mhm.
because
Hmm.
both in the book and in the movie, is not a Fremen, but he or she has been with the Fremen so much that she can translate that to the Atreides.
Hmm.
You can make the connection.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
somebody who's not a Fremen but has been there for so long that they
yeah,
understand the culture.
Hmm.
exactly. And considers him or herself, depending on the version, as part now of the culture because
You
it has
know,
been assimilated.
I find her or him in the book
Hmm.
like a parallel to any random person in Juarez. You know,
Like, yeah, well,
in
a
the way
random
that
person
in
that
the
is a new arrival to the city.
not really a new arrival, more
Yeah.
like your parents or my parents that they weren't from
Oh,
here,
but they're
they
now from
weren't
here.
native, but they got to live here for so long and
They now to the
live
city.
here for so long that they are now part of the they are locals.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's
something
the
like
way I
that.
see
Yeah,
her. That's the way I
yeah.
see her, and
Okay.
in some sort of way. And I like that. I like that because we, as people from Juarez, as people from the desert, we can relate to Fremen. And so,
Yeah, I
yeah.
really. Yeah. So, another final thought is, can't wait for 2023 to see the next movie. Hopefully, the series on the Bene Gesserit comes between the two movies. I
Hmm.
think that's gonna allow for do a lot of exposition and clarification of the
Hmm.
universe,
Hmm.
so they don't have to do it in the movie, and it doesn't get clunky. And keep an eye on Paul on what his real role in the series is.
Yeah.
He might not be a hero, maybe he is.
Maybe he is, maybe he's not. Okay. So thank you, Stephen, once again for being my guest.
No,
As
thank
usual, it's
you.
a pleasure.
I,
And
it was a blast.
awesome. This is awesome. Any episode that I make with you is a blast. It's awesome. So this is and once again, this is your space. This is where you get to say what you want to say.
Okay.
Hmm.
Just real quick, I wanted to remember that it was a year ago on Dia de Muertos when you
Mhm.
were first on my channel,
Oh
which is
Yeah.
yeah, I
like
remember.
because we did a Coco review.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so it's been a year that we've and we've done a couple collaborations. This is my second time on your channel. And I
Third,
bel-
Third.
third again.
and
Uh,
second or
mhm,
third. Anyway, I
mhm,
know I was on for an Expanse one time.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been on my channel a couple of times, and yeah, it's really great, Leo. It was a real pleasure to actually meet you and talk with you and hear you
Same.
nerd out. But one of the things that I love the most in the world is hearing somebody speak with passion about something they love. And it was really great to listen to you get really nerdy about that stuff. But
He
yeah,
would be, yeah, he
um,
would be a great addition to your I know that nerd section.
yeah.
Mhm.
Although I will. Okay, I'm going to give y'all who stayed here to the end. I'm going to drop an exclusive. So I will tell you all, we're doing Beetlejuice Sunday. Cecilia will be there to talk about
Mm-hmm.
it. If you just got to have more Dune conversation, my co-host John is covering Dune on his channel tomorrow night
Mhm.
with Chloe from Girls Gone Canon will be his guest for that. But I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you that I have my next I know that nerd lined up, and I'm super hyped because it is Clint from the Learned Hands podcast. I don't know
Mm.
if you know Clint, but some of you do, and but that I think it's a great get because he's really smart and really funny, and we're gonna have a blast for I know that nerd, and Yeah, I'm thinking I might have to give me some Leo in there before too long too.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. He's really something. I
I
mean,
believe you.
I wasn't going to marry some boring dude that
Yeah,
doesn't
I
feel
know.
passion for
I mean,
anything.
I,
Yeah.
when yeah, I figured that's why I didn't have a chance. So, but no. In all honesty, thank you so much for having me. I wasn't going to get a chance to talk about this movie unless you did, so I really appreciate it.
No, thank
And
you.
yeah, look forward to seeing you in a couple days over on Here Be Dragons.
Of course, with a real classic. I mean, I've been a Winona Ryder fan and a Tim Burton fan
Hmm.
Hmm.
forever. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be awesome. And Leo, this is your time to talk about your projects. And
My
oh,
projects.
by the way, before we say anything else, as you may notice, I have a new intro. The
Oh.
past intro was musicalized by this guy. It was one of his many, many, many songs. And recently, I was forced to change the song and change the whole intro. But it was a happy accident because it came out really cool. And that song was composed by none other than my great husband right here.
Wow. Thank you. Well,
So,
projects. I don't have that much going on right now. I did publish an EP
mhm,
with a friend of mine, Hector, who lives in Colorado, called Norte Bravo. It's original music. It's in Spotify and all other digital platforms. It was a stretch because it's the first time that I sing on any of my material, but I'm really happy how it turned out. I have another band called Holocausto Norteño, which
mhm.
is like we call it punqueño. It's like it mix like norteño music and punk rock. And we've been inactive for a couple of years, but we're starting to work on new material, and we might have a couple of shows coming up uh, early next year. And what else I have in that type of medium? I think that's it for the moment. And yeah, so just check it out and come and enjoy any of the other projects. I have a musical project with Cecilia called Dry Willow, which is kind of folk rock kind of
Mhm.
thing. And that's pretty much it. So I really enjoyed this episode. I think this is the only first time I don't feel awkward being here on video, but yeah, I had a
Uh,
blast.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
both for coming to my show. My
yeah.
show. Feels weird to say that, but okay. Okay, so some news. I do have a brand new Patreon. And by the way, I once again want to give a shout out to Patty, who is currently is my one and only Patreon right there. I want to thank her for her support and believing in my project. Thank you really, really much, very, very much. And okay, if you want to be a contributor, a patron to my channel, if you want to support what I do, you will find the link in the description of this video and some of the uh, you know tax and that kind of stuff that YouTube does. And one of my main objectives for getting this Patreon is being able to translate and subtitulate all of my all of my episodes, which are
Uh,
50
So from English to Spanish, and it's
and Spanish to English. Yes.
I will tell you there is not a link to your Patreon in
Oh,
the
oh
description.
man.
mm,
Not
Okay.
newbie.
there.
I'm a newbie on this. I'm a newbie on this thing of Patreon and that stuff. But yeah, I will put it on the chat or I will put it on the description later of this video.
I
And
believe
so
in you.
yeah, that's one of my goals. That's one of my biggest goals, to being able to pay a translator to do this, so that no one gets left out and in this conversation. And yeah, so that's it. And well, thank you both once again for being my guests. Thanks to all of the people who stayed up to the end and joined the conversation with us. Thank you so, so much. And well, I invite you, if you want to keep this conversation going on, you may join my Facebook group.
Mhm.
You may find it on my Facebook page, Geeksterilia, at Geeksterilia. You will find the group there. It's called Geeksters. And currently it's plainly mostly memes and that sort of stuff. But my goal is that it grows and we start having this conversation.
You say Facebook, but what you mean is Meta, right?
Oh yeah, Meta.
Aren't they about to change the
Very Ready
name?
Player One, Ready Player One, very much alike.
Yeah.
And well, yeah. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your likes and your subscription to the channel if you're watching on here on YouTube, or your follow if you're following this on your favorite podcast platform. And well, see you next time, and may the force be with you all.